Thank you once again for tuning in to 28 Days, where we're celebrating our heritage, our history, our culture, and our stories. And we once again have a distinct honor to welcome Chiji to the set. Welcome to the set, Chiji.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
I'm intrigued. What does that mean, Chiji?
Chiji is actually an Igbo name in southeastern Nigeria.
Okay.
It means God gives. In fact, the full name will mean it is God that apportions each person's own attributes or each person's own talents.
Okay. Now, Chiji, give people a background on or who are you? I mean, what you do? Who are you?
Oh, okay. Thank you for asking. I'm actually an associate professor in the Department of English here at Villanova University, and I've been here for about 13 years now. Before then, I grew up in Nigeria.
So what are some of the things coming from the continent of Nigeria, or the country of Nigeria on the continent of Africa?
Yes.
What are some of the differences that culturally that you felt that, because I hear an accent, right? How do people view that? And how do people differentiate you from being Nigerian, or can they tell before you spoke, or African American, and what are some of the commonalities and differences?
It's actually a very interesting question because I get all kinds of reactions. Ordinarily, like you pointed out, somebody will pick up that this guy has an accent, and the most common question was, "Are you from the islands?" That is how it is put. You know, nobody mentions, "Are you from Jamaica?" or any particular island. Is, "Are you from the islands?" And it will be my distinct pain to say, no, I'm not from the islands. I'm from Nigeria. Depending on how that question is posed, otherwise I'll just give you a different kind of answer. But there is always that attempt to mark you out as different right away, you know. And no matter how well you may be culturally aware of where you are, the American space, it doesn't matter. You know, the indication is to extend to you the idea that you are different.
You're different.
And therefore, that is where you always begin. From that point of difference, you now have to find ways of establishing your bona fides as being part of this American cultural, economic, or social space. So it's always there.
So let me ask you this, so say if you and I walked into a room, and I don't know if that happened. I speak in the tongue I speak in without an American accent, if you want to call it that, and you speak in the native tongue or your accent. Has there been a different interaction or how we are perceived? Have you ever experienced that?
I'm not very sure, frankly, because, again, it's all about context. It's about where are we stepping into? Are we stepping into a bar? Are we stepping into a conference? Are we stepping into some hood? It depends, you know, where we are. That will invariably what will determine how I'm perceived in relation to you. But the way I understand it is that I try to understand it as more like the human curiosity to establish, you know, individual histories. You want to believe, you want to see people differently for whatever purpose, you know, sometimes, you know, for meaningful reasons, but we always want to establish that we can place somebody somewhere. And that is always where we begin. All other kinds of differences or reactions or responses that come from the recognition of that difference becomes one that is grounded in the history or the agenda of the one who is asking, you know, or who is trying to make that kind of determination.
So in your cultural context that you grew up in, and then coming from the country of Nigeria on the continent, I keep mentioning that. It's on the continent. Because there's more countries on the continent.
Indeed.
How has you navigated those uncharted waters coming to an environment or a campus such as Villanova? Do you feel like when an incident happens in Africa, you are the sole representative of that? Or are you the spokesperson every time a situation come up? I mean, how have you navigated that, one, being a professor, and two, just being a man and a person in those kind of conversation and dialogues?
That's a great question. I've been in the United States now for 22 years.
Okay.
So it's been a long time. I did my graduate work at Binghamton University in upstate New York. And then from there, I proceeded to Loyola University in Chicago, before coming to Villanova. So I've had, all kinds of, I've been in the country for a long time. I always like to think about the question you are posing in terms of what I do in my classroom.
Okay.
Because I teach African literature, I teach Caribbean literature, I teach Black British literature, and sometimes I teach African American literature as well. And especially when it comes to teaching African literature, I'm always, I'm no longer shocked or surprised when I encounter students for whom this class, the class I'm teaching, is the first time they are reading a work by an African on Africa. Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, I'll pick up, say, a novel like Things Fall Apart. And it's a literary work, one of the greatest, novels, works of fiction published in the 20th century, anywhere in the world. And so there's a lot of literature, stuff about literature to talk about in that particular text. But I'm in this position where I can't afford to talk about it merely as literature, as I would perhaps do if I were teaching that particular novel to students in Nigeria. I'll have to try to unpack all the cultural stuff, information there, so that oftentimes I feel like I'm like a missionary, an ambassador for Africa, for the continent, trying to explain what is behind Okonkwo acting this way, or what is behind this particular kind of narrative point of view. So that is always how I feel. That is how I feel many times, in my interactions or in just living in the United States. This idea that I'm more than a teacher. I'm more than a professor of literature, that in fact there's a little bit of the fact that I'm carrying also the burden of speaking for a space that is not quite familiar, or a place that has been somewhat maligned in the media or by other representations, and therefore I carry this burden of trying to at least tell my audience that there is more than whatever they have seen, they've heard, or they've read. But you can operate that way all the time because, one, I'm an individual, and people will never get every information at the same time. So so other times I just choose to teach or live out the way I feel I want to live out at any given time. But I can always recognize how one is challenged by this other burden of trying to explain a continent to people.
So, in closing, because this is intriguing, and I would love to get to the Boko Haram thing, but we don't have time. Trust me, we don't, because I like to hear a perspective from somebody from there. But what are some of the ways that people can get in contact with you?
Well, I'm here at Villanova, St. Augustine Center, and the
What's
fourth
your email?
floor.
What's your email? Give me the
Is Chiji, CHIJI.Akoma, AKOMA @villanova.edu. And I'm crazy about email. So if you shoot me an email, you are getting my response in a matter of minutes or latest an hour.
Oh, wow. Hey, this is good stuff. I'm a little disappointed we're out of time. But listen, we thank you once again for tuning in with 28 Days. We are celebrating our history, our culture, and our heritage, and hearing these unique stories in its own authentic voice. We ask you to tune in tomorrow, and as promised, we will bring back another distinguished guest. And once again, have a great day.